you could throw me a contract and I would read it great. It'd be no problem, but you could throw a stone and find a lawyer that can do that if they're not into your business and they don't understand the business model.
So now your company offers that across all your other offices as well.
Yeah.
That's really entrepreneurial of you to like, see a market and just like go after it and like build the infrastructure internally within your company for it to expand across the nation.
It was just sort of, if something like this comes up, I was doing it because I had started to do it and I had started to build it. And even then, once I was hired back on by the firm, it would just keep sort of trickling that way. And then I started to have clients coming back. I was, coming in there not really having an understanding of all the business things that some of my peers would have had going in. So I had to take on every single opportunity I had to learn. And I just kind of grabbed it with both fists. The experience very much became like, you're going to get what you put in here. And I know that can be a tough thing when you think about it in some ways. But it's also, again, deeply satisfying. It's rewarding.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today on Careers Under Construction. Now, before I talk about law, I want to talk to you a bit because a lot of people, they'd see Melissa, they see on LinkedIn like a partner at one of the, most reputable law firms, and they'd think, career path must be so linear and polished. But what was, the career path really like for you?
Not linear,
Yeah.
Right away. I've often described it as circuitous. So, and very organic, especially at the outset. There are lots of people in our profession who set out truly and authentically, and they know exactly what they want to do, and they, narrow in on it with laser precision. That is impressive to me. That was never me. So I think, I'd say it took a bit of a long and winding road for me that I think is surprising in maybe two ways. The first way was just even, making the decision to go to law school.
Okay.
I think, like a lot of us, and it's a personal story, but probably not a unique or a singular experience. But early on in my undergrad, through a series of events and the loss of somebody pretty close to me, I sort of got a bit lost.
Okay.
Lost my focus and was sort of just moving around a little bit rudderless. And so I wasn't really seeing one footstep in front of the other professionally at that time, which is kind of wild to say now. But truly had no idea. And something really major that got me, I think, I had a lot of love and support in my life, for sure. But something that really helped me get back on track was actually happening to just change my focus in school and walked into a classroom and lucked into a really motivated professor, someone who, clearly really invested in his students and his people. And for some reason, that was like the catalyst. It was like, oh, well, this person, pardon my language, really gives a shit about all of this and about his students. And
what class was that? Do you remember?
Okay, yeah, I absolutely do. And I'd love to shout it out. But it was at the University of Winnipeg, and it was an Intro to Criminal Justice course.
Oh, cool.
And the professor's name was Dr. Richard Jockelson. And fun fact, years later, he's now the dean of the law school.
Oh, no way.
I did not know that was going to... I can't make this up. But it was wildly, it was just a reminder. It was such a moment of self-awareness at a relatively young age where I was like, wow, I don't know how, but I actually forgot not only that, I like this stuff, I like to learn and I like to achieve, but I'm actually good at it. And I don't know how somewhere in all of the personal circumstances and things that come up, people forget that. And so for me, that was quite a catalyst and set me back, if you can believe it, on a bit of a course. So less linear, more learn, pivot, learn. And so from there on, I was hyper motivated, got involved in absolutely everything that I could. And but again, criminal justice. I'm a corporate lawyer, as you know. So the other kind of, when I talk about circuitous and not linear, once I was in law school, it seemed like a given that I'd go right into criminal law. And I did get my first job at the Crown Attorney's office right after my first summer. And, that was great. It seemed like I was set on a path, and then all of a sudden, like people do in their adult lives, had the crisis of confidence that so many of us do and think, is this going to be it?
Right.
Is this the career? Is this what I'm doing? Is this all the things I'm doing, going forward? And happened to take a chance and applied at, Aikins Macaulay Thorvaldson with no business degree, knowing it was a corporate private practice firm. Like, you know what, I'll be willing to learn anything anyone has to teach me, but wanting to kind of broaden my horizon and, thought that might be a bit crazy having such a sure thing laid out for me in the path that I'd taken. But they saw something. Mm-hmm. They're like, we really think like you'd be a great fit for business. And I thought, well, you must know something I don't, because I'm willing to dive in with both feet, but no idea. So I guess, kind of to your question, I'd say like if you would have asked me like 20 years ago, are you going to be a lawyer? It blew my mind. And then even 10 years after that, if you're going to be a lawyer, what kind of lawyer are you going to be? Commercial lawyer. Like, love the contracts, love working with that sort of businesses and burning with the fire of sun for corporations. Like, it wasn't my angle at all, but it's ended up being something I found incredibly satisfying.
Very cool. So your undergrad, you said, was in criminal justice.
That's right.
So were you gonna? It sounds like you might have wanted to be like a police officer. Was it always wanted to be a lawyer? Like, was that plan A from the start? You burned the boats and you always wanted to be a lawyer, or did you have different career options in mind at that point?
I think at that point I was just trying to find my footing. So I don't know that I had a real agenda about it. But as soon as I started, something sort of clicked. Like I said, it really, I just kind of heard the call. And so that program was excellent. It had a lot to do with, there was policing, there was corrections, there was certainly like a more academic approach that you could have taken to study any of those things, all of which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
A lot of program and policy evaluation, which I, nerded out on hard, liked all of it. But it was always the law angle that, really spoke the most to me. And I found that as I started to kind of rediscover how I liked to learn and that I was enjoying achievement and felt like I could really contribute at that level, it was the legal aspect that I was really drawn to at that time.
Very cool. So you said you spent your first summer with the Crown Attorney's Office?
That's right.
So what made you go from like public practice to going into private business? Like you said, they took a chance on you, but what made you want to take a chance in going into the private sector?
It's such a good question. So there was a couple things. I think the seed had started to plant where, I had an MBA mentor. And she was a little bit older, closer to the end of her career.
Okay.
They pair you, the Bar Association will pair law students with a mentor in the bar to ask sort of questions, Q&A and all of that. And she had mentioned to me something fabulous, and it was just that law is this great career. It's really open. You can do so much with it, whether you practice or don't practice. And I don't know, maybe that like had started to root. And I'm like, oh no, am I just, going one way and just doing the first thing that kind of grabbed the first room you go in influences you so much. And so that had started to percolate authentically. And then, in a more kismet move, just to kind of feel out if I was crazy to give up a sure thing job to try something else, I went to a career fair. Like the law school, puts on career fairs. And like a true keener, like I did today, show up early. And I'm like, I don't want to be like too early. So I'm in the washroom, like washing my hands for like the 17th time. And I ran into a woman in there. And she happened to work at Aikins Macaulay Thorvaldson, now MLT Aikins. And she clocked what I was doing immediately. She's like, yes, you don't want to be the first person in the room, so you're stalling. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And just struck a conversation up. And something that she said that really stood out to me, because I was very candid and would be. I'm like, I'm not really crazy about corporations. I don't really know anything about them, and I didn't go to Asper. I'm not a business kid. I did psychology. I like politics. I'm not sure, like, if there's really, maybe let me know if you think this is something that would be crazy for me to do. And she really, I don't know, sales, also just a very natural, warm person, and just kind of really sold it to me as, this really gives you the opportunity to learn forever. Like, you will never stop learning and educating and becoming better. So it's like, if that drives you, if that little seed more than the subject matter is something that speaks to you, then, you really should give this a try. And so it was, I think, the combination of those two things, the inner voice that was already kind of like, I don't know, maybe figure this out a little bit. And then that I only threw in one other application like that. It was just, I was either going to stay where I was or I was going to go there. Yeah. And, I think even up to the point where I walked in the interview room, I'm like, they're going to take one look at me and they're like, no, not a chance. And that isn't what happened. So, because I thought maybe my background, the criminal justice focus, while I was very proud of it, still am, that they might look at that and be like, maybe this isn't someone who would succeed in, private practice or would be as focused on, the civil aspects of things. Mm-hmm. And no, they saw transferable skills and a drive for education and high standards and things that were absolutely true, but not something that you could self-diagnose at such an early stage.
Or put on a resume, really.
No,
right?
like, and I would never dream of, like, such a lawyer thing to say, but never dream of misrepresenting myself. It's like under promise, over deliver always.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I like what that you mentioned. Like, you mentioned that lady was your mentor, the one that you ran into in the bathroom there.
Yes.
And how she said to you, it doesn't matter if you have business experience, but criminal justice and psychology. Like, psychology matters so much in business, human behavior, building relationships. I would almost say that those things may be even more important than just having a business degree and showing what that piece of paper can do for you in 4 years. Because there's a lot of people that graduate that don't have the communication or the people skills that really take you to where you are in life now.
It's really true. And, I again, at the time, you almost diminish the value of those things because you don't know how to recognize the value. You're not sure what the people in the room making the decisions are really thinking about. And we certainly have, and I'm sure it's true for law students now, have a conception about what they think the firms are looking for. Did I have the shiniest law-related job? Or, oh no, I took a summer off and went to Thailand. That just means I'm, a slacker. Or, all those. And I was no different. Like, I had a very probably skewed lens about, what they were going to focus on, what they'd care about. And that's definitely evolved over time. And, I think one of the things I've come to realize is just how much of the life skill, like that emotional intelligence, that quality, it's, it might not always get you in the room. Like, life's not always fair. And, I think sometimes when, whether it's for a job interview or with a client, you're not going to have all the time in the world. You've done all the work. You've got skills. You've got talents. And sometimes you only get the 15 minutes to put it out there. And sometimes it doesn't shine through. But I do believe that it might get you in the room to have the stuff on paper, but what's going to get you the job or what's going to make the difference when you're really succeeding or driving a client relationship, it'll be that emotional intelligence, that it factor, those personal skills, what you've picked up along the way that has nothing to do with your education.
For sure. Now, obviously, so many people watch the TV show Suits, right? And like you had mentioned earlier, you feel, when you're in law school or just graduate, you feel like there's these certain things you need to get in. But really what they're looking for are these skills that you can't necessarily put on a resume sometimes. Now, in Suits, they talk about that firm is we only hire from Harvard or whatever, right? But what are the real things in a law firm that people in your first let's say 6 months to a year in big law, tell me about how it's different than what TV portrays it to be.
Oh, so different. I mean, first of all, no one dresses that well at the office. Yeah, no, you're not seeing everyone walking around in Balenciaga, but more I think substantively. I think you're kind of thrown in what was realistic about it. Maybe I'll say that. One thing I liked about the first season for anyone who's watched it was they did a good job of, the kind of feeling where, you're kind of, trial by fire in the sense that, everything you're seeing is new. Everything you're touching is new. And I mean, that can be really scary, but the expectations are commensurate. It's really sort of a learning by doing situation. So you're touching bits of files, you're looking at documents you may have never seen before and being asked for your opinion, asked to weigh in, asked to look in on those things. And, it's all a little bit overwhelming, and there isn't a lot in those early stages, especially as a student, whether it's as a summer student or through the formal articling program that every lawyer has to do. You're getting bits and pieces of it, so not the full context. And I think that's where, the challenge, that's the battle testing that comes in. And it's what's nice about it is those are, discrete bite-sized chunks of different things, and you only have to have so much involvement in any of those things. So that seems appropriate as you're coming up and still learning, trying to figure out, I think I was asked to draft documents. I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but I will find it out.
Right.
But the reality is the lawyers that are training you, the people around you, they know this. They're sending you out there to, test your problem-solving skills. Everything gets looked at before it goes out anywhere. It's part of the process. But as you go, as you start to approach that 3-month, 4-month, 5-month mark, what's kind of amazing that you wouldn't see in a show like Suits is just how crazy the learning curve is, and you'll really impress yourself. It's one of the best things about it, because it is the student experience as a lawyer is a hard thing. But even looking at the work you did at 6 weeks, looking at the work you did at 5 weeks, you're like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Would never do that, worst ever. And then it just kind of keeps scaling up from there. And then gradually, whether it's 6 months or closer to the end of the year, when you step back and realize you can see the trees for the forest now, and you're like, wow, okay, now I understand. I read all of that stuff. I researched all of that stuff. That is how the deal actually got done. Like that little document that I drafted had this effect. Oh, now I have this context. And so then it's not just the work and the training, it's satisfying in a way that sometimes just working, generating documents, doing stuff would be. And I don't think you get that sense from Suits. It sort of just seems like one assignment after another, which makes it, hilarious, but not always as realistic.
But then you get to see like how those small pieces that you contributed at the beginning tie into the overall case at the end.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what, like you were an articling student, I think you said in 2014, was it?
Oh, yes. 2014.
2014 to partner by 2022.
Yeah.
That's 8 years. That seems like a pretty quick way to become a partner. Tell me about that journey.
Oh my gosh. Well, I will say, kind of consistent with the journey to law. I mean, I definitely did not set out with a specific goal or design to be like, yes, it's got to be firm partner. I think, again, I was looking at things in much more bite-sized increments, very much about what kind of a lawyer I could be. Like, how good of a lawyer can I be? Am I going to be good at this? And, so maybe a little bit short-sighted at the outset, but I'd prefer to think of it now as really organic. I was, coming in there not really having an understanding of all the business things that some of my peers would have had going in. So I had to take on every single opportunity I had to learn, and I just kind of grabbed it with both fists, like just, anything I could do, like no matter how novel, strange, like just kind of really took the opportunity. And again, for the maybe 5th, 6th, 7th time in my professional career, got very fortunate with the mentors that I ended up being paired with, who were all too happy to teach. And I kind of came to realize quite quickly, and I'm sure it's true of other firms, I'll only speak to mine, but the experience very much became like, you're going to get what you put in here. And I know that can be a tough thing when you think about it in some ways, but it's also, again, deeply satisfying. It's rewarding. It's almost like the way people think about it when they're going to the gym or personal training. It's like, okay, if I'm showing up, if I'm doing it, I'm actually getting better. I'm getting the better work. I'm meeting the clients. I'm understanding things in a very different way. So that was definitely the focus at the beginning. And then you kind of get comfortable and good at one thing. And then it's like, no, you don't do that anymore. On to the next.
Right.
And so I got the opportunity to observe and, passively, but also actively, I think some of the best people who were really generous with their knowledge and their experiences. So I got to, not only work on the files, learn the things that lawyers learn, but observe people manage conflicts, handle difficult situations, and you start to build up, like an emotional and professional toolkit. Yeah. So you're like, oh, I liked that. Oh, that would never work for me. I'm not going to ever do that, and so on. And
you kind of mold that into your own personality, essentially.
Absolutely. And I think that's true now. And now from, the vantage point coming closer to partnership is, obviously a challenge. Like, I mean, not, going to the partnership, I would be the first to say is not a sign of failure. It's not, it's definitely, it's a different role, than the one you have as a lawyer or an associate and practicing, it's a slightly different focus. And I believe, I think at the time that I was promoted, I had just sort of come to terms with the fact that, you don't really, I certainly wasn't sitting there thinking to myself, yes, that is me. It was more of a reflection backwards and realizing these are all the things I have been doing already. Like, I like working with my team. I've been building infrastructure. I've been building a practice group. I have an organic book of business that I have then started to be very deliberate about and how to service and how to manage. And I'm like, well, I guess that is quite different than just doing the work and being part of the team. In many ways, that came on with a lot of support, but organically. And then at the jump-off point of becoming a partner, it then has to become quite deliberate.
Right.
So, I would say that journey it's similar but different.
Okay. You mentioned the practice group. I wanted to talk about that because that was something that you built, like you helped build from the ground up essentially within your firm, right? Can you give me a little bit more context on that? Like, how did you see that gap in the market? Why did you decide that was a good gap for you to fill personally and for your firm to step into?
Oh my gosh. Well, I appreciate the question because I'm very proud of it. So the franchise practice group. So I came up as a transaction, M&A, commercial, Jill of all trades lawyer. And I wish I could say that it was, first year Melissa that was like, aha, there's like my market savvy and this is something that we need. But the reality is, not unlike in the student experience we were describing, sometimes a file comes up, someone needs to do something, and no one knows how to do it, no one's doing it. Right. So I was never one to shy away from a challenge.
Okay.
And so the franchise work and the franchise adjacent work and the clients started to find me. And the lawyers that were working with them were like, well, I need some support. Help me figure this out. And so I applied the same rigor to it I did to everything academically. I'm like, I am going to study this legislation. I'm going to know it so well. My templates will have templates. And because you're so unsure of yourself at that time, and it's a period of starting to trust your judgment and build your competencies, it almost worked for me organically, because I was thinking to myself, oh gosh, I'll never know if I'm right, but it better be the best answer. Like no one's going to have a better answer than me, not out there anywhere. So I'll just make sure that, there'll be no gotcha moments, and I'll learn this as best I can as I go. And so that really started it years ago, like way back in, even when I was a summer student in 2013 to articling in 2014, it was just sort of, if something like this comes up, I was doing it because I had started to do it and I had started to build it. And even then, once I was hired back on by the firm, it would just keep sort of trickling that way. And then I started to have clients coming back. And then it was sort of coming back to revisit things that are more complicated. Well, I better learn how to do all of that too. I better self-educate. If I'm going to keep doing this, we'll keep evolving and keep learning. And I know I'm making that sound like quite remarkable in some ways, but law is always in motion. Like we're always responding to the needs of our clients, whether you're a commercial lawyer or otherwise. The business is evolving. IP is going out crazy. We always have to respond to it. So this was just a natural extension of that.
Yep.
And so even when I was doing, the deal work, which involved, everything from buying and selling businesses, well, you have to buy and sell franchises. So like the skills started to grow in a really companion, organic way. I was doing a lot of commercial leasing. Well, if you're a storefront franchise, you've got those the yin yang. So I was finding that there was a lot of natural synergies there. And I started to look at franchises differently because and so that was probably 3 or 4 years in. I developed quite a bit of a stable already and a lot of experience, but was still not thinking about it in a very focused and deliberate way. And franchises were still very much like the Golden Arches and McDonald's and, 2 like cheeseburger meals. Yeah.
Right.
I date myself with that reference. That's not a meal anymore. But, and then I started to realize, I'm like, this is actually really sophisticated. It's a business model. I mean, you've got subscriptions, you've got, janitorial services, education services, medical services. There's so many different things. And it sort of clicked at that point. 2 things happened. It clicked that this was a lot bigger than I thought it was, and, something that, really made a case for fractional legal services, and or feeling, as a private practice lawyer, a bit like an external in-house, because to practice effectively, you really have to be in the guts of the business.
Yeah.
You can't just you could throw me a contract and I would read it great. It'd be no problem, but you could throw a stone and find a lawyer that can do that if they're not into your business and they don't understand the business model. So that was one thing. And then I got a phone call, I think when I'd been doing this for about 5 years, from a colleague that was like, insert institutional lender's name here, wants you to come and speak to all their people and explain franchise law and how to franchise to them. I'm like, why? And they're like, well, because you're the guy. I'm like, oh, I'm the guy. Like, I'd always suspected, but never knew. And so it had just kind of gotten, again, very fortunate, a lot of hard work, but organic to that point. I hadn't done a lot of marketing, a lot of self-marketing. I hadn't even looked that much internally after we merged and ended up now we have offices all the way to Vancouver. I'm like, surely I'm not the only one who's been doing this by any other name. Like, surely we have, we should organize. This should start to be, and that was sort of the turning point for when it became sort of a subspecialty, as I think how I've been referring to it, maybe a little too modestly, maybe without meaning to diminishing what it had become. And I was amazed. Our shop has some incredible lawyers, in each of the provinces, who'd had such unique and varied and wide-ranging experiences in anything from car dealerships, recreational marijuana, just so many different industries that you'd never even think, wow, we really have a lot of expertise here. And I think it's time to kind of organize it. And again, there's no formula for how to do that. You've got business groups, you've got advocacy groups, but I'm like, how do I, no one was telling me no, but no one was telling me how.
Right.
So there was no obstacle kind of other than just that. You had the Field of Dreams, the thing. And
yeah. So now your company offers that across all your other offices as well.
Yeah.
That's really entrepreneurial of you to like, see a market and just like go after it and like build the infrastructure internally within your company for it to expand across the nation.
Thank you.
It's interesting because like, as an entrepreneur, obviously you want to play the long game, right? Like you want your business model to last as long as possible. But at the same time, there's so many changes like in the market and within trends and what types of franchises are out there, right? So you have to do lots of like micro pivoting at the same time and iterations to your product or service. What environment do you feel like you thrive in better? Kind of like the patient long game or the more so, spontaneous micro pivoting?
I think it's such a lawyer answer, but a little column A, column B. Like, I think you have to kind of look at it both ways. And especially since I founded the thing, I felt like I had a responsibility, I still do, to take the longer view, even if up to that point, it had been a little bit more pivot, respond, adapt, maintain that agility market-wise and be ready to kind of jump on the next opportunity. And that's still there. But now that I've got, and the team's amazing. Like, honestly, it's a young team, which is kind of, I think, novel for this kind of a group in the country.
Okay.
There's certainly some like more established, out east and out west, franchise groups that do similar things and offer similar services, but nothing that had been prairie focused or Western Canada focused before. And so, there's a lot of stamina, a lot of energy, a lot of like ingenuity in our group, which is exciting, but novel. So I would say in terms of the long view, that's where some of that more granular planning has sort of come in. And it sounds like such a silly exercise, but I would love to poll lawyers like across offices and ask, how many of you actually could knock 2 doors down and list everything that person knows how to do? Because you almost forget how talented people are and what they're capable of doing. And it's always a function of the clients and situations they've experienced. Like there's lots of deal lawyers, but no one's had all the same deals and no one's had all the same experiences. And therefore, like the toolkits are all very different. Right. And what we found when I was comparing notes with other franchise lawyers or people who'd had franchise experience, even in our office, I was like, wow, I'd never thought about that. But I'm like, I guess we can do all sorts of other things that, I wouldn't have necessarily articulated, but are absolutely in our wheelhouse. So that really built the terms and the focus and became a bit of a driver for putting it out there. And it wasn't even so much a marketing push, but more of an educational push, even internally, like within our, 200 plus lawyer firm. It's like, there's actually people here who really know this stuff and could be of real value to you. And so that, I think, was the longer view thing that's still going on now. And we got involved in, and we are involved in, the national organization, like the CFA and the International Franchise Association as well. So those were other ways to kind of gut check that, what we're doing is kind of, meeting the standards that, are out there nationally. And like I said, I never want anyone to have a better answer.
Yeah.
Might always be right, but I'm like, no one's going to have a better answer than us.
Right. Interesting. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago, like, somebody said they wanted you to come speak because, like, you were the guy, right? That's interesting. I want to double click into that because I was curious. Like, it sounds like before that, you almost didn't feel like you were validated externally. Like, you were still, like, almost like maybe questioning yourself, like, am I the expert in this? I know I have the technical background, but do people actually believe in me? Almost. It sounds like maybe you fought some, like, I don't know if it was like age bias or gender bias or maybe a combination of it all.
Yeah.
But before that person said they want you to come speak to them, how were you feeling inside about like your ability to take this type of stuff on?
Yeah. Definitely a little bit of all of that. I think that, it would be hard for me to say that those types of factors don't creep in at all stages. And whether they're real or perceived, I think both can be quite damaging or paralyzing, to action. And I think more than anything, it was sort of that second guessing or self-doubt because, already busy, got a lot going on,
Right.
and the transaction work is great. I've got great mentors. Am I rocking the boat? Am I taking too much on? Is this really more of a side project? And if I don't have, the full energy and full tilt to commit to this, is there really any value in it? And yeah, you can then start to conflate that. And I think so, even more than, maybe hearing less than supportive commentary or having people kind of roll their eyes about what I was doing. Like, that wasn't happening much. It was more, I think, just you're not necessarily going to have people saying gung-ho, like, yes, like, absolutely, like, here's the path. Now you just need to follow it.
Right.
So those challenges are a little bit self-imposed, rational ones based on real things, but a lot of the times just getting a little bit in your own way and having that tendency, if you're not getting the external validation sort of constantly, whether you're actually going to take it to that next step, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So you went from that to last year, you were recognized as like the female trailblazer of the year.
Well, yes, I was an excellence awardee for that. So it was like
Okay, tell me about that.
Yeah.
I want to hear about that.
Yeah. That was a real honor.
And that's nationally, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that is put on by two of our leading legal publications. That's Canadian Lawyer and Lexpert that put that on.
Amazing.
And it is a nominated category that's highly competitive. So I was a shortlist. So anyone who's shortlisted for the award becomes an excellence awardee. So I didn't win the full award, but I was shortlisted and therefore got an excellence award for it. And it basically, you get nominated by fellows in the profession, and the nomination, but you have to accept it. So maybe it's a good point to say. So I'm like, to your previous question, it's probably an interesting point because I had been reached out to by a former student and mentee who had said, "Hey, I'm thinking like this would be great for you, and I'm going to throw you out there." And there's a lot of legal awards and things that, kind of seem a little bit like a self-aggrandizing or pay for play, or they're just part of the job. Like, it didn't necessarily have, not that they're not valuable or, worthy recognitions, but can feel a little bit like, okay, sure, like that's really nice. And, and there's sort of that immediate tendency to sort of self-deprecate and be like, well, do I really want to be thrown out there for something like that when inevitably there's going to be, this incredible, and there were some incredible people who've, spent 28 years in tax court or have sit on the most grand organization of all time. And I actually read what this person had put together on my behalf. And after like a solid ugly cry at my desk, I was like, okay, I get it. Like I think, and two things kind of happened. One, I was extremely touched because it was not reading some flowery hyperbole like, oh, if you're looking for law's next shining star, you've come to that. It was very much just like, this is a description of how I practice and my style of mentorship, which is, like heart forward, authentic, invested, bespoke, helping you challenge your assumptions about what is and isn't in your way and just the impact it had had on them. And I just like felt that. And it seemed so simple and everyday, and in a way, I almost had that tendency to objectively undervalue it and be like, well, that's not what they're looking for. In the same way we talked about the interview, like that's not what they're looking for. And then I kind of had the epiphany because it was easier for me to undermine my feeling about it than to undermine hers. Because clearly I'm like, this is a value that's important. Like this is something that's excellent. And if we don't make that worthy of recognition, if that's not something that's aspirational, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
So that became a lot easier for me to champion than myself. But like even then I gut checked it, right? So I told her how touched I was. I'm like, let me just get back to you. So I reached out to a few other former students, mentors, current, and a couple of my current associates who are stuck with me and kind of asked them, what do you think about this? Like, give me your temperature on this. Like, there's like on a zero pressure or expectation basis, let me know how you think. And like the response, oh my gosh, it was just like, it was wild. Like I said, really like hard not to be touched to see the impact, like the real impact. So that kind of became the win in a way. So I was like, okay, we're going to let this ride and see what happens. And we were blown away that it actually got recognized. And, like I said, with in the world, like the stable of people that were
Yeah.
nominated for this award were wildly objectively and subjectively impressive, I'm sure. But to see our kind of angle, that sort of day-to-day integrity and in reciprocal investment being valued as excellent, like this is national level excellence, not just the group creation. Sure, yes, that's a trail to blaze, but it's more about, leading white collar with a bit of heart it was sort of what they really picked up on. And in my mind, the fact that the vote of confidence was coming from inside the house, you know what I mean? The fact that it was, people who's, had been directly affected by the way I have led and practiced, and, whose opinions I deeply esteem and value was, I think more to me than anything, but it was absolutely an honor to see that recognized on a national level.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
You mentioned in your, like, how the way you lead and the way you mentor, you specifically white collar, but you said heart first, right?
Yeah.
So you describe yourself as kind of like hyper rational, but also like deeply empathetic, right? Now, when you say that, it almost sounds like two opposites.
Yes.
Right? But how does that help you as a person and as a leader?
Yeah, I embrace the principle of authenticity. Like it's both very much me. And I'd say, as a professional, like as a leader, I think it really helps to have that degree of empathy, especially in a law practice, in a demanding law practice, because of course my team expects me to be rational. Like they need leadership. They need to understand the expectations need to be clear. They need to feel confident in following what they're following. Obviously, at the end of the day, they're going to be capable of running their own, because every lawyer is their own business. They were all working together, but no one owes anyone their career. They've got to be able to feel confident in what they're learning, the deliverables they're making, how they're servicing their clients. So that the rational stuff has to be there. It has to make sense. And that is what drives most of my decision making. But to remove the empathy from it, like for me, like it's not something I've ever been that great at compartmentalizing anyway. Like not naturally. I can do it when the situation demands it. But if I'm leading authentically, I don't think it takes anything away from the efficacy of leadership to understand that my expectations are high, and that's going to be hard sometimes. I can hear what your struggle is as you're dealing with it. Why can't we communicate? And I can be upfront with you about the fact that our roles in this are maybe different, but your role is not less valuable than mine. Like we're doing this together, and to me, it's foundational. It's maybe not something that people come to, recognize in exactly those words, but you can't build anything on a shaky foundation. So if you're not fortifying people from the ground up, whether it's as an institution, a business, a law firm, then you're kind of building castles of cards, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So as you were coming up from like an articling student to now partner, obviously you had some mentors yourself. Was a lot of your mentorship like vertical mentorship, where you were leaning on certain partners, or you had mentioned like you're not a great lawyer unless you're like able to think about the business as an extension too. So like maybe there was like business professionals that were also mentoring you. So there's vertical mentorship, or there's also the horizontal mentorship, right? Being able to call upon like colleagues that are the same age or at the same year of articling or law as you. Which did you lean on more?
Both are huge.
Yeah.
And I think especially as you're coming up initially, that sort of peer-to-peer mentorship, it's a reason why a lot of firms, including ours, sort of tries to layer the mentorship that's over you, because there's, going to be some questions that you've got the 10 years, 20 years out partner that I don't know if I want to have to ask this person the same question for the third time, but I definitely need to ask them, and then have the person that you can just knock on their door. And to me too, that, it's sort of a great, when I think about it from the beginning, it was, beginning of my career, you start to realize quickly that this isn't a job. This is a vocation. This is a career. It's different. So having that degree of investment, that shared sort of collegiality of, has anyone dealt with something like this before? Like, what did you do? How did you do it? And having that be like, it's very natural to the growth. And I think that sort of shared reciprocal mentorship, support, for lack of a better words, is foundational, especially at those growing, coming up stage. And even now, I would say some of the peers that I have, and now we all do slightly different things. Still battle testing our ideas. If something's like, I thought I was being really reasonable here, but like, was this like a little bit like, how do you feel about this? And then of course the vertical mentorship, was a lot more structured at the beginning. And I think, rightly or wrongly, I think it's important. Firms tend to do that, businesses tend to do that because they want to have accountability. You don't want someone to fall between the cracks, but sometimes the best mentors you have sort of form organically. You end up working with someone, you're like, wow, like that's someone I really take to rather than someone you're assigned. And I just happened to get lucky that I was assigned to really good mentors, that we had compatible styles but very different styles, so I was able to learn a lot. And I'm proud to say that at least internally to the shop, a lot of those mentors are still the same doors I would knock on to gut check me or double check, or if there was a big file, big project, let's teamwork it together.
Yeah.
So it's a big, it factors into absolutely everything that I do. And now that I'm doing so much of it layered downward, same thing. Like I'm learning now, like that I'm replicating and streamlining and learning. Like mentorship is not like a one size fits all at all. If you want it to actually work, it's got to be tailored, bespoke. It's got to evolve with the mentee, because their needs are going to be different at different points in time. Clients' needs are going to be different at different points in time. So having all of that kind of at all the different ages and stages, I think is crucial for it to actually work.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm curious about partnership at a law firm, because there's all different types of law firms, different sizes, right? There's the husband and wife law firm that maybe has 3 or 4 people. There's a large law firm like yours. Like, are there certain metrics to become a partner? Like, do you have to generate a certain amount of revenue? Do you have to have a certain amount of clients or mentor a certain amount of lawyers? Or is it kind of more about like the impact you're making to the firm?
I think it's a combination of all of those things. Like most firms will, lawyer answer, it depends. Like most.
That's very diplomatic.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think, but it's true. I mean, not unlike, market volatility. Like there's got to be sort of some ability to have some discretion about, what works, what does the firm need, what does a group need, and I'm sure there's some variance in terms of partnership need at, a smaller shop or a mid-sized shop versus a larger shop that might have offices across the country or across multiple provinces, because all of those decisions affect all of those people. So I would say, if someone was looking at, partnership or considering, I think what the part that gets missed, like from the outside, it's not everyone kind of knows you're gonna have to work hard, you're gonna have to really care about your clients, take ownership of that. It's no longer, I've done my assignment, I drop it on the desk, I'm done. It's sort of like these needs could evolve. It doesn't mean you can't set reasonable boundaries, but like like this is something that you take ownership of start to finish, and and then from there that consider that just the cost of entry. Not like you'd have to have a little bit more than that. You'd have to think, if you want people working with you, working for you, if I want associates on my team to help me with my work, it's like, do I have that kind of work to offer them? Because they're coming up, they're investing too. And, their time and energy matters as well. So it's like, if there's just not enough to go around, then maybe this isn't the right angle for me to take. So I'm sure all of that factors in regardless of the size of the firm. But certainly those types of things, thinking of it more in terms of like that business development, that steady stream, like is the service we're providing still relevant? Is it still offering the value we need it to? Are we priced appropriately? Like if those types of levels of business thinking are not, you're like, nope, I just kind of want to be a good lawyer and be a really good lawyer, then maybe like the traditional partnership model might not work for you.
Cool. So you used to, and you still do, like M&A, mergers and acquisitions.
Yes,
as a corporate lawyer. Do you have any like really cool stories about companies in Manitoba selling and just making the founders really happy because there was a good connection there, or
oh my
they
gosh,
exited and they made a lot of money, whatever it might be, and you don't have to necessarily say the companies, but just the impact that you had as their M&A lawyer on the deal.
Yeah, like without giving the specifics, that's always a really nice one, and I'll say that kind of the satisfaction you get from doing it is micro level and macro level. Like on a micro level, something you never realize about transaction work. Certainly not in law school. Like I think I was looking at it like it's just paper. It's soulless. There's nothing to it. Like whatever.
Right. Soulless is a good word.
Yeah. Like it really seemed, like I said, I made the joke that I didn't burn with the fire of sun for corporations. I still don't, but these are really important, critical tools that allow my clients to do the things they want to do. And I don't think necessarily it's easy to get a sense of that in law school, that there's people behind these things. There's relationships. There's people you're working with. They're having good days. They're having bad days.
Right. And there's people that have probably spent like decades building their business, right? And they're just like ready to exit. I had a friend of mine, Mike Fada, on recently, and one of the things that hit me, what he said, is when he sold his company, and I'm sure you've heard a story, but it was like a $400 million exit.
Yeah, big
Super
one.
Cool. Mm-hmm. But on the next Monday, he couldn't go back to work. That was something he spent 20 years building. All of a sudden, he just felt kind of like, sure, his bank account was healthy, but he felt alone.
Yeah, the exit transition's tough.
Yeah, and as a lawyer, like, how do you, counsel people on things like that?
We do. It's funny because, I said, we like to try and stay in our lane, but our lane ends up taking on multiple dimensions. Yeah. And I'd say in terms of counseling people as they exit, for their exit planning, because I do the entire life cycle of the business. So I've had the chance to see things start right through to sales, when they're scaling up and they're coming back down. And I think it's the same advice I'd give to a professional, coming up as a lawyer. It's like, you've got to be really honest with yourself about yourself. It's not just, there's not like a quick little checklist of, here are all the transitional items you're going to want to think about. It's like, how much does control matter to you? Are there things that when you walk out this door, I'm like, that's going to hurt? Have I built in enough contingency for that? Sometimes it's like, are you willing to stay on for 6 months, or do you really need to rip the Band-Aid? Right. And if you're on for 6 months, are there decisions that, you're going to care about being made? Because we should deal with that up front. Right. And I find that goes a long way. The more, and again, that's something that I can say to somebody. It's like, a lawyer can counsel you and say, all of those elements, we need to understand how much you value all of those things, because there could be, on paper, there's a way for you to exit with even more money. Just give the buyer a little more control a little earlier. But what does that mean for your team and stable of employees that you've had for all these years? For a lot of it, people exiting, that's going to matter a lot more, making sure that that's covered. Yeah. So if I was just looking at, the dollars and cents or something in terms of deal strategy, without that empathy, without that human element, without thinking about, and if, the client in that situation isn't honest with themselves about what it is they really want to achieve, then, the best outcome and the best option might not be possible. And I think the magic really comes in when that happens, and you get really deeply satisfying results.
That's very interesting and a very good perspective on it. Because you're right. When businesses sell, typically the seller will stay on as an advisor for a portion of time, and although they're an advisor and it's not their company anymore, they may not have the final say in things. And for somebody who's built a company over a long period of time, that's got to hurt. Yeah. Right. Change
happens quick. Change is scary for everybody, regardless of how many dollars and cents they're walking away. It's a human element, and there are things you can do to manage it or start the process of accepting it. The preparation is all. It's never going to be easy, but the preparation is really key. And I think I don't know if you've ever heard the chocolate bar analogy, but it's really popular with.
No, tell me.
Okay, so I used to do the negotiation workshops at Robson Hall, and I think I'll get ahead of things for the 2 L's here, but it's this idea that let's say you have 10 chocolate bars, Halloween candy, and they're all different, and you get the 2 lawyers in the room, kind of being like, all right, we're haggling over these chocolate bars, and this guy walks away with 4, I have 6. I'm like, aha, I definitely got the better deal, but it's like, what if the only thing your client cared about was the Reese's, and would have happily given up absolutely everything else just to walk away with that? So it's like Coffee Crisp is gross, because it is. Yeah. It's and so it just, if you don't take the time to get honest, explore the priorities, you can have a really skewed understanding of what a successful negotiation would be. And I like to think of situations like that, you've left options off the table. There's a better deal here for you if you haven't explored some of those things. And we always try to, I certainly tell my mentees in my stables, I'm like, sometimes you're so tempted to just cut to the chase because you know the best way to do things, but you really need to make sure you understand. Like, at the end of the day, we're client service.
Yeah.
You know, the deals can get done. There's lots of people who can do a good deal.
Yeah.
But if you're not exploring those options, you know, maybe there's actually something that makes both sides really happy and they'll both walk away feeling like winners. Not always, but if you don't explore it, you won't know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good analogy and a really good point. Like, at the end of the day, you're in the service industry.
I just wanted to say coffee crisp was gross on a podcast.
Well, Reese's peanut butter cups are my favorite, so I'm glad we can agree on that. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk to you about your personal life a little bit now. Like, you mentioned in questionnaire, like, you know, you're a trivia nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, trivia nerd. Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, it's I've come by it honestly. You know, I'm kind of known as a bit of a wild card. It's just that I seem to have accrued like an absolute almanac of useless information. So whenever I've happened to play trivia, I am that obnoxious person who might not know like the very obvious thing, but there'll be that one question, that Trivial Pursuit question. I'm just like, what? Like, who even knows that? I'm like,
right.
Like, that's me. So I've made a bit of an informal name for myself.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
You also mentioned you're a sauce boss. You love to cook.
Yes.
Not a great baker, though. You don't like to do that.
Not a great
baker. Tell me a little bit about that, and how does that like define you as like kind of like in your personal life, but also leader in your law firm?
She's agile. She's adaptable. Like, it's funny because you've got to have a plan in place when you're, cooking. So it's like I'm definitely more of a cook. I love to make sauces than a baker. And I think it's just about, what it kind of translates to more naturally, I think, is I love learning the concepts. I love learning, the principles of things. And, once you've put like all the Tetris pieces on the board, you can start to really see how they fit together. And cooking is so much more adaptable and you can maintain that agility that way. Maybe you need a little bit more flavor, you can add it. Suddenly somebody wants an extra plate. Oh, you can add that. We can make that work. And I've always kind of enjoyed that and found that satisfying. And again, people like to do what they're good at. So,
fair enough.
And as far as baking goes, in my defense, it always tastes good. It looks so sad.
Oh, fair enough. So it's about the presentation.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're cooking, do you follow a cookbook, like the instructions, or are you freestyling most of the time?
She's freestyling. I definitely draw inspiration. I mean, now I feel like the internet is so fabulous for that. There's so many, algorithms are firing recipes and things at you left and right. So I'm definitely always interested. Love a cooking show.
Okay.
Big Gordon Ramsay fan.
Nice, me too.
That was probably the one person in the world I would be starstruck by, Gordon Ramsay. Yeah. But it doesn't come from absolutely nowhere, but very rarely following any sort of recipe.
You probably wouldn't be too kind to your cooking.
No, probably be raw. Yeah, no. Actually, it's funny. I saw him on stage outside of his fish and chips restaurant the last time I was in Vegas. Way too shy to say anything to him because he was actually my alarm clock in undergrad.
No way.
He would just yell at me to wake up
and
get to work.
You should have told him that.
I know, but I was definitely, like I said, I have a, I'm not really thrown off by celebrity in a traditional way. But when it's someone who's self-made, that's a self-made man. And I find that very awe-inspiring. Yes. So I lost my tongue there a little bit.
Yeah. Too funny. What would you say to somebody who's like, maybe earlier on in their career and they feel like they're a little different or they don't fit the mold, but they really look up to lawyers and maybe they want to be a lawyer one day? Like, what would you say to somebody like that?
Oh, so many things. I think probably the first thing I'd want to say is, don't be so quick to give up your own agency or not recognize it in a situation. Because I think, and again, that's a total projection, because I think a lot of us tend to look at, especially earlier on life and careers, as like, this is just happening to me. And it's very rarely just happening to you. It's happening around you. You're a live agent in everything that's happening. So whether it's, rejection or, you're not necessarily seeing yourself represented, whether it's, demographically or the lifestyle you want to live or whatever in the role or the job you want, that doesn't mean there isn't a path there. It doesn't mean there isn't, like, you don't belong in that particular role. Like make so many assumptions so early on about all those things, because it's based only on the information we've got to date, and we're making those decisions without the benefit of knowledge or context or anything. So I think that it's funny. There was it's a funny story. I was in a group fitness class 14 years ago, and this has stuck with me since then. It's a good example of this.
Must have been a memorable class.
Oh my gosh. Well, they were having us like, it was either like huge amounts of weight while holding a plank for way too long, or just a burpee circuit, something horrific. And the instructor like goes to the room and he's like, you know what, I want to tell you a story about learned limitations. And so of course you're just like shaking. It's like, tell me. And it's like, you know, like, and use the example of, and it's a little sad, but like of like, you know, circus elephants, like these young elephants with the rope, like they're convinced that they can't break that rope. Like they are convinced they can't, because they've tried and they've failed over and over again. And what you learn from that, and it's reasonable and rational to learn from that, is that you can't break that rope. And you rest on that, and the assumption solidifies, and you kind of proceed in the face of that knowledge. But, you know, if you're not kind of revisiting that and checking in with yourself and seeing yourself as, again, as a live agent in things, you might not realize as a grown elephant, you could rip that rope right out. You've learned that. And the rope isn't what's actually holding you back. It's your belief. It's your knowledge that is the case. And so again, that was definitely probably not based on science or anything, and was definitely used to get me to do like another 1,000 burpees. But it really stuck with me. Like I think about it often. I'm like, okay, like, is this a real barrier, or is this, you know, just not the right time, not the right tweak? Like, is there just something that we need to revisit here?
Limiting belief in your head.
Yeah, and so like even when we were talking about mentorship before, like that's a big part of, you know, leading with intentionality is helping people who maybe don't have the experience or the context just yet. You know, you don't tell them, you know, what they're going to be or how they're going to do it or whatever, but you learn what you can't do so much earlier than you learn what you can do.
Yeah.
So kind of taking the benefit of your experience and helping them challenge those assumptions, those foundational assumptions once in a while, so that they can kind of grow and see what they're capable of. I think that's always kind of resonated, not just because of the workout trauma, but it's always resonated with me.
No, I love that you recognize mentorship, and like obviously you've got a passion for paying it forward, and
Definitely.
that shines. One of the things you kind of alluded to there was like self-improvement. Like obviously I can just like recognize in you that you're one for self-improvement. That goes without saying. But part of self-improvement is like recognizing our weaknesses, right? It's probably one of the hardest things to do, but one of the things that gets us the best results in self-improvement and shows us where we really need to improve.
Definitely.
Right? Is there an example you can think of maybe like where, you know, you've recognized a weakness and how it's helped actually improve your life?
Yeah, and I love that you asked, because I actually, one of the things that, you know, and if any of my associates end up listening to this, they will laugh, because I say all the time, like, there's a lot of strength. It's really quite empowering to recognize your weaknesses. And I think there's quite a few of us who, you know, type A's, who beat ourselves up a lot about, you know, the standard we think, or where we think she should be based on, you know, completely imaginary or arbitrary metrics. And just having the ability to say, hey, this is a weakness, and that's something I can do something about, is incredibly empowering. Like, again, that's that agency at work. So definitely have had occasion to discover a few of mine. And you know, one thing in particular, as I moved into private practice, as someone who had been such a career student and keener, was letting go of, you know, abject perfectionism, like perfectionism for perfectionism's sake. You know, sort of like, you know, the law of diminishing returns. It's like, I will like sit here over this until it is absolutely granularly perfect. It's like, well, we just needed one sentence about that. You know, you didn't. It's like, oh, okay. You know, I can just, you know, learn a little bit about, you know, actually thinking about what the actual need is here, rather than, you know, just the desire to get it just right. So that was one. And I mean, I do think in terms of self-improvement and weaknesses in general, like it's never too good to, you know, not critically examine your own strengths. Like we tend to assume, I think I'm a really good communicator, but what do you think? You know, like you know, how is my team actually getting the message? I might be encoding a message in a way that I think is crystal clear, but what are they actually decoding from that? And so while I do think, you know, and I pride myself on trying to be a good, upfront, honest communicator, if that's not landing, or you know, for whatever reason, if I just assume it's just a set and forget, then you know you're missing a lot there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like that one about letting go, especially the perfectionism piece.
It's hard.
Yeah, I resonate with that. And you know, a saying that sticks with me is like, perfection is the enemy of progress.
Totally.
Right.
It
And
is.
it's so true. It's so simple, but so true. And it makes it very difficult to let go at the same time. Anyway, last question I have for you, Melissa, is if we could look back at the younger version of you, the version that was like, you know, wanted to go to law school, in law school, you know, the lady that was, you know, unrecognized, maybe not as confident, didn't know the path was going to be the way it is now, what would you say to her today?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is keep going, you know, like get good with your bad self, you know, like I think, you know, that person that I was, which I still very much identify with, yeah, like just didn't trust one foot in front of the next. And I just say to, you know, just keep going, you know, be deliberate, be intentional, and yeah, be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Well, thank you so much for coming on Careers Under Construction today.
Of course.
It's been a pleasure having you.
It was a sincere pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hopefully someone can take something out of that.
Oh, this was great. You had so many golden nuggets of information. And
it was the coffee crisp, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was the coffee bar analogy. I love that one.
I'm going to get some haters for that.
Thanks again so much.
Thank you.
Another episode. Peace.